Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of Damascus Steel, the lost metallurgy secret that produced unbreakable swords. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. For 500 years, European knights who faced opponents armed with Damascus steel blades watched their own swords shatter on impact. Damascus steel was sharper than anything Western metallurgy could produce, yet flexible enough to bend without breaking. Crusader chronicles recorded it with a mixture of awe and fear. A blade that could cut a silk scarf dropped across its edge. A blade that held its edge through battles that destroyed lesser weapons. Then, around 1750, production stopped. Not because Damascus steel fell out of fashion, because no one could make it anymore. The specific knowledge required had vanished so completely that it took modern electron microscopes and 2.5 centuries of failed attempts before anyone understood why. And when the answer finally emerged, it revealed something medieval smiths had no framework to understand they were doing. What exactly was Damascus steel, and how did its secret disappear so completely? This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the wider world of ancient technological anomalies, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Ancient technical knowledge is remarkably vulnerable. It lives in the hands of craftsmen, in the minds of engineers, in the institutional memory of workshops and guilds. When a civilization collapses through invasion, plague, climate change, or internal conflict, that knowledge can vanish within a single generation. There is no guarantee that what is written down will be preserved, and much ancient knowledge was never written down at all. It was transmitted orally, apprentice to master, in a chain that a single catastrophe could permanently sever. This vulnerability helps explain what might otherwise seem impossible: that the ancient world possessed capabilities we did not recover for centuries or millennia. The Romans knew how to make self-healing concrete by mixing volcanic ash with seawater. When the empire fell, the recipe was forgotten. Medieval European builders worked with inferior materials for over 1,000 years before the technique was rediscovered through analysis of surviving Roman structures. The knowledge did not disappear because it was suppressed or hidden. It simply died with the people who held it. Apply this principle more broadly, and the anomalies of the ancient world become less mysterious, not in the sense of being explained, but in the sense of being plausible. If Rome could lose a concrete formula for a millennium, what else might have been lost? What might advanced cultures in earlier epochs have discovered and then lost, leaving only fragmentary traces? A strange artifact here, a suggestive diagram there, that later generations would struggle to interpret. This is the question at the heart of every anomalous discovery from the ancient world. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding Damascus steel, the lost metallurgy secret that produced unbreakable swords, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. Question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. Damascus steel, known in its raw form as woots, was produced in the Middle East and South Asia from approximately 300 BC to around 1750 AD. The finished blades displayed a distinctive wavy surface pattern, the so-called damask or water pattern, which became the signature of the material and gave it its name, though its production center was India, not Damascus. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be T aside, anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes, but as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered historical accounts, including those from Crusader chronicles and Islamic military texts, consistently describe Damascus steel blades as capable of extraordinary sharpness and resilience. The claim that a finished blade could slice a silk scarf dropped upon its edge appears in multiple independent sources, suggesting the edge retention was genuinely exceptional by the standards of the medieval world. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. The raw material for Damascus steel was imported to Middle Eastern smiths as woots ingots from southern India, primarily from the region around Hyderabad. These ingots were produced using a crucible method that achieved unusually high carbon content, between 1.5 and 2%, far exceeding the carbon levels in conventional iron of the period. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, production of authentic Damascus steel appears to have ceased entirely around 1750 AD for reasons that remain debated. The most widely accepted explanation is that the specific ore sources in India, which contained critical trace elements, were exhausted or their trade routes disrupted, making the original formula impossible to replicate even for smiths who knew the general technique. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of John Verhoeven, a metallurgist at Iowa State University, and Alfred Pendray, a bladesmith, began serious experimental attempts to recreate Damascus steel in the 1980s. By 1998, they had produced blades displaying the characteristic surface pattern using specific Indian ore samples and controlled heat treatment cycles, and published their findings in the journal Metallurgical and Materials Transactions. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. In 2006, a research team at the Dresden University of Technology, led by Peter Porfler, published findings in Nature confirming the presence of carbon nanotubes in samples taken from authentic historical Damascus blades held in the Stuttgart Museum. Nanotubes are a modern nanotechnology concept. Their presence in a medieval artifact was entirely unexpected and had not been predicted by any of the researchers investigating Damascus steel. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations. And in each case, The alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain Damascus Steel, the lost metallurgy secret that produced unbreakable swords. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that John Verhoeven and Alfred Pendray's materials science explanation, the characteristic pattern and superior performance of Damascus steel, results from cementite banding and carbon nanotube formation during the specific heat treatment of high-carbon Wootz steel. Trace elements including vanadium and tungsten in the original Indian ore were essential to the process. The main objection is that perfect replication remains elusive, suggesting additional variables are not yet fully understood. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that Wadsworth and Sherby's ultra-high-carbon steel hypothesis, Damascus steel's properties derive primarily from its exceptionally high carbon content, combined with specific forging and annealing temperatures that create a superplastic condition in the metal. This explanation predates the nanotube discovery and accounts for performance without requiring trace elements, though it does not fully explain the wavy pattern formation mechanism. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that ore source depletion as the mechanism of loss. The specific Indian ore deposits containing the trace elements necessary for authentic Damascus steel production were exhausted by the mid-18th century, rendering the formula unreplicable even by smiths who preserved the technique. This explains why the secret was lost rather than deliberately suppressed, and why modern recreations using standard steel fail to match historical examples. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding Damascus steel, the lost metallurgy secret that produced unbreakable swords, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes electron microscopy conducted by Verhoeven and Pendray on authentic historical Damascus blades, confirmed cementite banding, alternating layers of iron carbide, as the structural basis of the surface pattern. This banding, formed through controlled cooling cycles, creates a composite microstructure that distributes stress differently from homogeneous steel, explaining the combination of hardness and flexibility. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented. The 2006 Stuttgart Museum study, published in Nature by Porfler's team, confirmed carbon nanotube and cementite nanowire formation within authentic Damascus blade samples using transmission electron microscopy. This was the first confirmed instance of carbon nanotubes in a historical artifact, and their presence was attributed to the specific combination of high carbon content and the catalytic effect of trace elements in the original ore. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed. Chemical analysis of original Indian Woods ore samples from Hyderabad identified concentrations of vanadium, tungsten, manganese, and chromium absent in modern steel feedstock. Verhoeven's experiments demonstrated that removing these trace elements from otherwise identical recipes prevented nanotube formation and produced inferior results, supporting the theory that ore source depletion ended authentic production. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding Damascus Steel, the lost metallurgy secret that produced unbreakable swords. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. Verhoeven and Pendre succeeded in producing blades displaying the authentic Damascus surface pattern using original methods and carefully sourced ore. The carbon nanotube conformation, published in Nature in 2006, resolved the long-standing mystery of why Damascus Steel performed as it did, revealing that medieval smiths had unknowingly engineered a nanomaterial through empirical trial and error. Most researchers now accept the trace element and heat treatment explanation as the core of the Damascus secret. Perfect replication at scale remains elusive because the original Indian ore sources are depleted and synthetic equivalents are not yet commercially viable. Research continues into whether modern controlled composition steel can replicate the nanotube formation process. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. new discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of Damascus Steel, the lost metallurgy secret that produced unbreakable swords from the historical record. Through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Damascus Steel ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.